Okay, so as Julia said, I'm going to try to talk to you a bit about how to improve your development experience using Bash scripts. I don't expect it to be like a super eye-opening experience. So what I would like this to be is more like change a bit your mindset about what you think about automation and what you think you can achieve with Bash scripts, and hopefully help you a little bit in those tiny little things that we do every day. So things that I'm going to cover, I felt like to talk a bit about the state of the art, like what's there. Before I introduce anything, I'd like to mention all the things that are there that can help you a lot. Then a bit of introduction about why I believe this is something that can help you, and a few examples of things that I've tried myself and I've tried with my team, and we've shared these scripts and things that maybe you can try yourself. Common problems that you probably will have, because everybody that has tried this that I've seen has had this problem. And then a little bit about sharing. By the way, this is going to be a combination of slides and live coding. I've never done a presentation with live coding before. I've rehearsed, I prepared things, but like Holly Cummings says, I hope the demo gods are with me today, because you never know what's going to happen with your life. Anyway, a little bit about me. So that guy, or this guy as well, it's the same. I'm a developer, consultant, writer. I like to describe myself as a software plumber because it feels like what you do is just connect things with other things to make sure things flow and nothing leaks out. So I actually stole that job title. I saw it from a colleague. I found it quite funny, and now I'm applying it to myself. As Julia mentioned, so I'm an independent, but I do most of my business with Equal Experts. It's an agile consultancy, mostly based in London, but they are all about the UK and some companies and some countries abroad as well. I like working with them because of the approach that they have. They do what they call a digital transformation, which is basically the idea of helping transform the culture and the process of a company through technology. So the idea is we get there with the idea of developing new technologies and new tools, but at the same time we're trying to change the way they think and operate. I also write. Some of the things that I've written recently, or the biggest thing that I've written recently, is this book, together with Daniel Bryant, so not just myself, Continuous Delivery in Java. If you don't do Java, you probably don't find it that interesting, although there are some bits that you might find interesting in it, particularly because continuous delivery it's a big thing, right? And it covers many aspects. And some of the aspects that we cover are things, for instance, like AWS or Kubernetes or security, which is completely independent from the language that you're doing. So if you'd like to take a look, that QR code will take you somewhere and you might be able to find something interesting. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk about what's out there. So before you start doing any scripts yourself, it's interesting to know some very useful tools. For instance, so I'm assuming everybody here is somewhat familiar with Bash. Okay. Does anybody use a different shell? Like, you're pointing at someone else, that's funny. Like, does anybody know Z shell? Super useful, really handy, very colorful, super cool. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. You can just, you could stick to Bash and then maybe apply some of the aliases that are out there, like this one, Bash it, which, oddly enough, they claim to be a shameless ripoff of Z shell anyway, so that's an indication of how useful that is. Now, these tools are great. If you can use them, use them. They do have one slight limitation, which is they're obviously going to cover things that are very common, right? And the problem with things that are very common is that they are not exactly your problems. Now, your problems usually are problems that other people have, but sometimes you will have problems that are specific to your particular team or situation. And in that case, these things will help, but they will not do as much. Also, another of the limitations is that these tools focus a lot on aliases, and there is aliases are good, but they have limited power, right? If you want to do a full-on script, that's something that you need to program. That's not just a script that you can define. So, it's a great starting point. Before doing anything yourself, get this. If you want to go further, you can go further. Now, what about if any Windows users here? Right. Can you use Bash in Windows? Sort of, right? Okay. So one of the options is Zigwin, any Zigwin users? It's pretty good. It's not, in my experience, as good as using a real Linux machine, as in if you're trying to do bash in Windows through Zigwin, it sort of works, but it's not as good as having the original. If you don't like bash, there's another option, which is PowerShell. In my opinion, it's not as powerful, but it's quite useful. The only problem with PowerShell, at least from the perspective of this presentation, is that yes, it's highly programmable, but it's not bash, which means all the commands that I'm going to teach you, well, you can do something like that, but obviously you cannot get the code and run it because it's not going to work, because it works completely different. I had a lot of talk recently about the new Windows terminal. Has anybody used the new Windows terminal? PowerShell, something that I have used in the past, pretty good. Maybe Windows terminal even better. Okay. Now, what's the point of all this? Did anybody attend Holly Cummings' presentation like an hour or 2 hours ago about having fun in the office? Yeah. So there was, I saw that too. There was an interesting point that she made, which is you have to get rid of the things that are not fun. And some of the things that are not fun are the tedious tasks. And she said, just automate them. So that's why. So I'm very grateful that she did that talk because she pretty much gave me a reason to do mine. So the reason to do this is to automate all those little things that maybe don't feel like a big thing, but when you do them a lot every day, in the end, they do amount to some overhead. So these are some of the things that would, in my opinion, justify doing a script. It can be very small, it can be just online, but it can be useful. So for instance, because you just don't remember and you're tired of Googling it every time, or because they are complex or risky and you just want to make sure that the one time you have it right, you don't have to repeat it, you just put down a script. Because you want to build a bit of muscle memory, right? So you just want to run the same command even in different projects. Maybe projects are even in different languages, but you don't want to have to think, oh, is this Scala? Is this Maven? Is this C#? You just run the same command every time regardless of the project. You just want to put things together that you want to make sure that you do together. You want to do common checks or whatever, you name it. Right? It's just something that you do a lot or that you find it a bit annoying and you just think that automating it is hard. I've got some examples. I like to do this a little bit interactive because what I'm going to present is things that I have found useful or that people in my team have found useful and we have automated. But it might be that you have a particular use case that is maybe similar. If so, I've tried to build some allowance to get some feedback on the spot so we could try to, if it's a quick thing, automate it at the moment. If it's not a quick thing, then we can do it later. What that means is if we don't have that many requests, then maybe I might finish early, hopefully not. But well, let's see what happened with these examples. So the first one, commands that you can remember. How many people use Git? Yeah, okay. How many people do an interactive rebase? How many people know the command to do interactive rebase by heart? Yeah, a few hands. How many people have to Google it every time you want to do it? That's right, right? So what do I mean by interactive rebase? It's basically, I'm going to cheat here because I do have a command. So I mean this, right? It's the thing when you say, yeah, I want to change the order, or I want to merge commits, or I want to do stuff with the history of my Git history, right? So I got very tired of having to Google it, so that's why I decided to automate it. So let's do it right now. So let's create a new one. By the way, IntelliJ has a very nice bash plugin. I'm going to call it iRebase, for instance. Let's make that bigger. Can you see that properly? Okay, who can tell me the command? Let's try to do this interactive. So obviously it starts with Git. Okay, I'll do the next one, rebase. Okay, I'll do it all. So it's basically that. Let's try it. I'm going to make it a bit bigger here. Okay, it's complaining. Why? Because you have to tell them where you want to rebase to. So let's say, for instance, I want to rebase the last 5. So that will be head, kind of minus, and then a 5. Oh, I haven't staged it. Of course, I'm editing things. Okay, but now you know that that's the command. Okay, so you just Googled it. You want to remember, so you do this. And then you remember, okay, that's how you do it. That's how I can rebase my last 5 commands. And then you just save that. If I try to run that, then yes, it's complaining because I have local changes, but that's the point. The point is I can do it. Okay, so let's commit that. Just so I don't have local changes. And now, if I run iRebase, okay, that's it. I don't have to Google that command anymore. Good. Now, there's a problem here, which is I am defaulting to 5. What if I want to do the less 10? What if I want to do the less 15 or the less 3? Okay. How many people are familiar with bash script? How many people are completely new to bash scripting? Good, only just a few. So then if I talk about variables, people know what a variable is. If I do this, anybody doesn't know what I'm doing? Good, okay. So just one person. So this is basically a variable. So if I do this now, and I comment this out, so the hash symbol is a comment. Here I'm just defining a variable, and with the dollar I'm accessing the variable. So if I run that now, then it's just going to say hello, right? And if I change the value inside the variable, then it's just changing what I'm showing. Right, so bash scripts have a number of predefined variables, which are, for instance, $1, $2, $3, etc. These are the parameters that we're passing in. So for instance, if I just call iRebase, I can call iRebase with 10 to hello, and it doesn't do anything because I'm not processing those parameters. But those come in as $1, $2, and $3. Which means if I do that, then it's going to echo those 3, right? Or if I just echo the third one, then that's the one that it echoes. Okay, so that's a way we can grab commands. So if I wanted to make this a bit more parameterized, I could say do $1 here, and then my iRebase, whoops, not that one. If I say 5, of course, I need to change them. Okay, if I say 5, then it does 5, like you can see. I'm just going to delete that, so it doesn't really do anything. If I say 10, then it does 10. Okay, so we have it parameterized. Yay! We have made our job a little bit easier by having an easier to do way, an easier rebase command. I don't need to remember what the command is. I just need to have my own command and say this is how many lines I want to do. Now, how about if I usually want 10, but I don't want to say 10 every time? Okay. This is where the magic in bash happens. When you access a variable, you can, by the way, there are 2 ways to access a variable. I can just do it like that, or I can enclose it with curly brackets. Enclosing with curly brackets has a number of advantages. One is, if I define this, right, let's say I want to echo that. It just says hello. Let's say I want to do, this is John, and I actually want the output to be Jonathan. So obviously that's not going to work because it doesn't understand that I want the variable to finish here, and that's just text. So with the curly brackets, you can indicate where your variable name finishes and where it's just text. So if you do that, then it's going to say Jonathan. Very badly spelled, by the way. Right? Okay. So curly brackets have a number of benefits. One is that one, defining where your variable finishes. The other one is you can add some operations. So for instance, this is me accessing variable 1, which is the first parameter. If I add a dash and then another thing, like for instance 5, what it's basically saying is, if the variable 1, if the first parameter is defined, get that value. If not, then default to 5, right? So now, if I do this, if I say 10, then it's going to echo 10. If I don't say anything, then it's going to echo 5. So then this way, I can change my command. I'm going to have to save that to be able to run it, or commit rather. And now I can run it with a parameter, and I will do the parameter that I've chosen. Or I can do it without a parameter, and I will use the default. Any questions so far? Yes? Oh, sorry. I've been reminded that if there are any questions, I need to pass the microphone on, because otherwise the question is not heard on the recording. Sorry.
Is the dash not version dependent on the bash that you're using?
What was that?
Is the dash syntax there not version dependent on the version of bash shell?
Oh, you mean the head slash, and depending on the version of Git?
No, we all know on the actual bash syntax. So I've used that in various versions of bash, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, that is true. So one of the gotchas that I was going to mention later is in this beautiful open source world, you may have slightly different versions of the same tool. So bash might be slightly different depending on your Linux distribution. Same with many of the commands, your date command, your cat command, etc., etc., etc. They might be slightly different. So yes, this syntax that I'm using, depending on your version of bash, may or may not be available. So what I would recommend is make sure you're using a version of bash that has this. This is very handy. Sorry, I cannot tell you more on that regard. Any other questions? Shall I move on to the next one? Am I going too fast? No? Good. Okay, so for instance, that's one reason to do your own bash scripts. As you can see, it's a very short one. So many times when people talk about automation, they're thinking about, it takes me 3 hours to do this, so I'm going to automate it. No, it can be something that it takes you literally 2 minutes, which is what it takes to go to Google and find a command. But those 2 minutes, if instead of 2 minutes, it can be 2 seconds, that's better, especially if you do this a lot. So let's go for another one. Let's simplify complex and relatively risky tasks. Now, again in the topic of Git, how many of you, when you do your commits, you use I'm guessing you have in your work some ticketing system, right? It can be Jira, it could be issues on GitHub or something. And then it's a very common practice that you add the issue number that you're working on at the beginning of the commit. Yeah, people do this? It's very common. How many of you have been working on an issue, making commits, putting the issue number, and after 10 or 15 commits, you realize you've been using the wrong number? Okay, so for the recording, the suggestion was just delete the branch. It's a solution. It's a bit nuclear to my liking, but it's a solution. Another option is if you do, run around. If you do an interactive rebase, one of the options that you can do is use R, which, as you can see down here, what is it? Here, means reward, which means you just use the commit but edit the commit message. Now that's very handy if it's 1. But if you have 15 and you have to edit every single one of them, that's a bit annoying. So, what other alternatives do we have? I'm just going to delete that. Again, Google is your friend. If you Google it, you will find people that have sort of solved this issue. For instance, Stack Overflow over here. And they give you this beautiful command here that is doing a filter branch with commands, with embedded, set, etc., etc. And I don't know about you, but the first time I saw this, I was a bit scared of running this because I don't know what it's doing. I don't know if it's going to break it. I don't know what's going to happen. So then what I did instead is I invested some time on understanding this, and once I was kind of confident of what it's doing, then I did a little script to do this. So that the next time I need to do something like this, I don't need to Google again, I don't need to type the command again, I just have my little script that I trust and it will do the job. So basically, I copy paste that. Into this. Okay. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Yeah. This can go so we have more space. All right, there's a lot going on here. Let's go step by step. So here is the command that I found on Stack Overflow, right? So basically what it does is it's filtering the branch, and what it's saying is you have to filter the message, right, the commit message, using this set command, that is this thing here, from this commit on. Does everybody know set, S-E-D? Okay, very quickly for those who don't, right? I'm not going to spend very long, but just very quickly. So set, it's short for stream editor, which is basically a tool to edit a stream of things. If I just type set like that, the only thing it does is expects input, so I can say hello, and then it says hello back. Goodbye, and it says goodbye back. Okay. Now, the really good thing is when you do things like this. Right? Is that the way? Yeah. When you say, okay, substitute foo with bar. And then if I say hello, it says hello. If I say bye, it says bye. If I say boo, foo, it will say var. Why? Because if I wanted to do more than once, it has to... Okay, set has a number of options. Just check the manual. But basically, if I wanted to do the same thing more than once in the same line, you have to add that particular option. So now if I say foo foo, then it would say va va. Right. You can see how you can use these commands to edit the commit messages in your Git history, because basically what you want to do is put the old number, the one that you didn't want, and change it for the one that you did want. Right? And then you just need Git to go all over your commits and make the change in all of them. Okay, so that's the first part. That's the set command. Now, how am I getting these things? Well, I'm using these 1, 2, 3 variable parameters, right? So I'm assuming this command is going to have 3 parameters. The first one is the old string. The second one is the new string. And the third one is the commit where I want to start from, right? Because I don't want to do this over my entire Git history. If I have a long history, this might take a while. You don't want to be sitting 2 hours. So then this is what I do. Now, because it is a bit of a, it feels to me at least like a bit of a dangerous command, this going through my history and filtering and changing messages in bulk mode, I wanted to add a little bit of safeguard. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making mistakes. So this is this bit over here. I said there are a number of funny variables in Bash. I mentioned $1, $2, $3, etc. Then there is $. There is this one, $hash. I'm going to come here to show you better. So $hash is the number of parameters that you have passed in. So, for instance here, if I say echo that, and I just call iRebase like that, it's going to be 0. I didn't pass any parameters. If I call it like that, it's going to be 3. I passed in 3 parameters, right? So then one of the guards that I'm adding to my script is, first of all, check that I'm actually passing 3 parameters. Check that I didn't miss anything. And if I did, then remind myself how to work this, and then exit the program. Okay, a little bit of word of advice on the syntax of if-then. Bash is quite temperamental when it comes to conditional structures, to the if statements or for loops and things like that. You have to make sure you put your semicolons and your spaces and your lining in the right places, right? This is fine. This doesn't work. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. This works, however, if I'm not mistaken. So if I call row wide commits with no parameters, exactly, that works. If you want it in the same line, then you need to add semicolon and that. Now, there's a lot of controversy between using one square bracket or two square brackets. So this, in theory, works as well, no problem. However, the plugin in IntelliJ will tell you that that's not good. I've searched on the internet about why does it need to be two square brackets instead of one. I just trust it. Like, it's probably one of those things like why tabs instead of spaces, or why Vim instead of Emacs. You just don't get there. It's not going to be good. Another interesting thing about conditionals. There are apparently many ways to check the same thing. They are not exactly the same though. The command, if you want to check the manual, it depends on the particular bash version that you have. It depends a bit on the particular distribution, but they are either the square bracket, that's actually a command that you can run, or the command test. You go there, and it will tell you things. So here, it gives you a list of all the different things that you can test or that you can check within your square bracket thingy, right? It can be, you can check for the existence type and content of files. It can be particular strings, whether a string is 0 or not. You can compare different files. You can compare strings. You can compare numbers. And this is the interesting one, because if I do this, for instance, 3 equals 3. Oops. This is another thing. You need to have a space there, because otherwise that might not work. It needs to be like that. Why? Again, I think it's because the tokenizer uses the spaces, so then it might try to think the 3 and square bracket is one single entity, and it doesn't know that entity. So then you need to make sure that you separate them. Okay, what happened here? Bash has a lot of ways of, once you start to understand the way Bash works, the philosophy is have a lot of very small, tiny, apparently useless tools, and then a lot of different ways of combining those tools. And that's where you get the real power of it, and that's how you can get behavior that really adapts to you. One of the ways to combine commands is with a ampersand. So as you probably know, commands and programs have exit codes. It's basically 0 if everything went fine, another number if something failed. And then and, here, or the double ampersand, what it basically means is if the first command is successful, then run the second one. If the first command is not successful, then do not run the second one. So because the first command is checking whether 3 equals 3, that's successful, so then it prints hello. If I had done this, it doesn't print hello, right? And here's the interesting thing. All the different operators, you have to be very careful with which one you're using. So -eq, that is the arithmetic equality. So if I say, is 3 equals to 0,3, the answer is yes, right? Because a 0 on the left doesn't make any difference. But if I use equals, that is a string comparison. So then in that case, that is not the same. Okay, so again, these are some of the causes. Be very careful with the comparators that you're using, because they don't all work the same way. So then this was the second example that I wanted to share. I have a feeling I'm going very fast. Oh no, we're good, we're good. Oh no, I'm actually going very slow. Now, consistency across projects. What I was talking about, mass and memory. So if you work like I have in the past, for instance, in if you have, everybody's doing microservices these days, and you may have one service in Java, one service in Scala, one service uses Maven, another uses Gradle, and I got tired of trying to remember which one is which when I was running the command. So one of the little things that I did is this run full build, which basically is a script that is trying to detect which file is in the directory, and then depending on that, I just run the run command, right? So first of all, I would check if there is a specific custom build script, and if so, that's my command, just run that. If I find a POM file, then run Maven. If I find SBT, then run SBT. If I find build Gradle, then run Gradle. And if I don't find anything else, because I that's usually what I work with, then it's what I say, what are you doing? I have nothing to build here. But then, of course, you could have something else that you may want to add to this list. If you do Rake or Node, or if you are old school and still using Make, which is very cool, then you could just add to this, right? A couple of things that are new in this particular script. One is the if-elif instruction. I guess pretty intuitive, nothing much to say there. But this is something that I wanted to talk about. Now, one thing that I realized that I usually do is I run the build, and because it takes a few minutes, I just get off to do something else while it runs. And then I forget, and maybe it has finished for 20 minutes, and there was a test error, and I haven't been working on it because I just forgot about the build. So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted this command to remind me or to tell me when the build was finished, right? I don't know if we're going to hear this now. So, do you know this, /a? Anybody know /a? Okay, a few people, so it's worth going. You probably know about escaping characters, so /end is a new line, /t is a tab. /a is a sound, right? If you had the old school big box computers, that's a typical beep that you would hear. That's how you do it. So, I don't know if this is going to work with this setup, but let's try. Can you hear that? No, it's because it's just my... I'm going to try to do a lot of them. Okay, well, if you're next to the laptop, which you usually are, you would hear it. So then what I wanted to do is, regardless of the result of my build, whether it passed or didn't pass, I wanted this sound to happen. So then it would be a key of, the build is finished, go check the result. So that's why I added this thing here. But I've talked about result codes, right? When a program works, the result code is 0. When a program doesn't work, it's something different than 0. And this is more important than you think, not just for things like this, to concatenate commands. So when I do this kind of concatenation, the status code or the return code is very important in this case. But also, if you do things like git bisect, etc., it relies on the result code of the program that you're running. So then you need to make sure that your program does a successful result code when it works, and an unsuccessful result code when it doesn't work. Now, the thing with scripts is that the result status of a script is the result status of the last command you run in the script. Which means that if you do run your command, run your build, and then you echo this, then the result code of your script is going to be the result of echo, which is always going to be successful, even if the build failed. So now we need to make use of another of those funny variables that Bash has. Oh, by the way, something that I didn't mention, if you just put a variable just like that, what Bash will do will be evaluate the variable and then evaluate the whole line. And because the only thing on the line is the value of that variable, that will mean it will run that as if it was a command. Yep. Okay. So another of the special variables is this one, $question mark. $question mark is the result code of the last command that you ran. So let's try to do this. If I do that, I know that worked. So if I echo that, that's 0, just a successful one. If I do this, that should have failed because 3, it is equal to 3, therefore it is not different. So if I print that, that's 1. So what I'm doing here in the script is I run the commands and then I capture the value, the status code of that command, of my build. And then I can run echo with no problem and then say exit with this particular value, right? So exit, the only thing that does is finishes the current script using the status code that you're passing in. So then this way, the status code of my whole script is going to be the status code of the build command.
Does it take into account the context of which script it is inside? Because you run a script, yeah, in a 23rd.
Sure.
Yeah. So would it be a result code of last? Could it be the result code of last last command from that script, or could it be just result code of all of the script?
Right. So it will be the result code of whatever this command is. So if this command, let's say for instance, my script found a POM file, right? So it decided the command is Maven. So then this will be the result code of running Maven. Say it found this particular file and then you run it, then it will be the result code of the compound build.sh. And the result code of that would be the result code of the last thing within that. So it becomes a bit like the matryoshkas, the Russian dolls. So always the result code of the entire thing is the result code of the last one. Right? And then if that one is calling something else and you're trying to use the result code of that something else, it will be the result code of the last line on that one. That is, of course, by default. If you say explicitly here, exit 1, then my result code is going to be 1. Because I'm saying exit with this result code. Does that answer the question? Okay, thank you. If not, we can always catch up a little bit more after. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So agglutinate task. I believe that's the right spelling. If not, I apologize. Now, you're working and you want to contribute changes, right? So we usually work in master. We don't do branching. We work in master, but that's just the way we do it. It's not better or worse. And one thing that I like to make sure whenever I'm finished with something and I want to contribute my changes is, first of all, rebase from master, because maybe somebody else did something. Second, run the build, because maybe my changes are not compatible with whatever changes were up there. And then if everything is fine, then push the changes. So because I want to always do these three things, I don't want to forget anything, what do? I automate it. So in the simplest form, I just have a script that I call push code that just does those three things in a chain. If the pull rebase fails, maybe because there is a conflict, it doesn't run the other ones. If that works, but the build fails, it doesn't run the push. If everything works, then I do push the changes. And then by doing things this way, I know it's going to take a while because it's running the build, but I know it's safe. I can just click it. I know that when the build finishes, it's going to do the beep, 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 so it's going to tell me. And then I can check to make sure that everything worked fine. Questions? This one is pretty simple. Good. Now, oh yeah, this is what I just said. How many times it happens that you run the build, it works, you push, the build is broken, and that's because you realize that there was a file that you didn't commit. So then obviously locally it works because you have the file, but in the build it doesn't because the file isn't there. So this happened to me a lot, unfortunately, more than I care to admit. So one thing that I did to avoid that was, in my push code build, I added a check to make sure there were not local changes that were not committed, right? So there's something else that I'm introducing here, which is functions in Bash. Why? Because one thing that I wanted to do is check for local changes before I do anything, before I do any pull, before I do any running or whatever, just check for local changes. And then do it again after, because I realized that sometimes in some of the projects that I worked at, people had added automated formatting to the build, which means sometimes it happens that after I run the build, I have local changes. and I want to push those local changes as well. So then, because we are programmers and don't like repetition, if you want to do something twice, before and after, what do? You put it into a function. The format of bashing functions is pretty intuitive. Just have a name, brackets. Don't put anything in the brackets. It's not going to use it. And then curly brackets to capture your function. Remember when we talk about $1 and $hash, etc.? Well, that works with functions as well. So if I want to pass, not in this case, because this doesn't need any input, but if I wanted to pass a value here, I could then use the value by using $1. So we can do a quick demonstration. So if I just call it like that, it doesn't print anything. If I call it like that, oops, then it prints hello, right? Simple. Nothing special there. Now, how about checking that I don't have local changes? So here are another interesting things of bash. Another way there are two new ways to combine commands in here, this particular line. One is the pipe, this thing, and another way is the backtick, this one here, right? Let's begin with the pipe. The pipe, you know all the rage that is these days about functional programming. I always say that bash is actually the first, or one of the first functional programming that became mainstream, because it really is the idea of you have many little functions that you can chain for a combined effect. So the pipe, what it does is it changes the output of one command and turns it into the input of the next command. So let's say, for instance, if I do ls, then obviously I have all that. If I pipe that into grep or into set, the one we talked about before, and I say I want to change the a's for b's, then that's what it does. And you could keep doing this, and you could then pipe that into another one. Let's say I want to, grep, so I want to get only the ones that has case. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm running git status, and then I'm piping that into a grep that is looking for the string nothing to commit, right? That's what I want. I want nothing to commit. So if I run git status here, there are things to commit. So if I grep nothing, just nothing, then I get nothing back because that string is not there. If I, can I get rid of that? Oops. Yeah, I can get rid of that. Right, so if I run git status now, oh, is that like that? Oh, yeah, different. Sorry. Yeah, okay. See, now it says nothing to commit. So if I do grep nothing, I do have output, right? Okay. So now I'm going to exploit that with the other way to combine commands, which is the backtick. What the backtick does is it will run that command and it will get the output and put it straight into that position. Okay, so for instance, if I did so here, I'm going to add the backtick here and the backtick there, and I try to assign that to a variable, and then I echo that variable, so it has put the output of the command into the variable. Okay, it doesn't need to be into a variable. You could do something like this. For instance, you could just say echo that, and it will get that as a string and put it there and then run the next command. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting that into the output. And then what I'm doing is my commit output empty? If it is empty, that means the string nothing to commit wasn't part of Git status, which means there are changes, and in that case I'm saying, no, sorry, you have local changes, you cannot push. And then my script will stop at that point, right? So I don't do rebase, I don't do anything else. It's like, first fix that. And by putting that into a function, then I can just run it at the beginning and at the end. Any questions on that one? Okay, 2 minutes left. Okay, I think it's going to be bang on. So that was the last of the examples that I wanted to share. Now, some common gotchas. We talked about one before, which was about the version. Permissions. Your files need to be executable. Like, you will be surprised how many times you pull your hairs out because it doesn't work, and it's just because you forgot to make it executable. So yeah, just make sure to do that. Also, if you're pushing them to Git or anything, Git knows about permissions. So make sure to push your permission changes into Git. Otherwise, it might work for you, but then the guy or the person working next to you might say that it doesn't work. So with that, put it on the path. Is everybody familiar with the concept of the path? Does anybody not know what the path is? Okay, I don't need to say anything there. Just make sure you put it on the path. Cross-platform compatibility, what we talked about before, the different distributions. If you use Mac, Homebrew is your friend. There is a particular package that is called Core Utils, which basically means the versions of utils that are available in other Linux distributions as opposed to the ones that are usually within Mac, which is going to make this cross-platform compatibility a little bit better. And then finally, sharing is caring. So whenever you start doing these things, whenever you start doing the scripts to help yourself, ask your colleagues because maybe they find it useful too. Or ask them because maybe they've known it already and they can share it with you. So it is good practice, I believe, to have a particular repository within your team or within your company where you share all these scripts, right? And you can version them and you can commit to them, and then you can help each other by sharing these things. In fact, I have the ones that I showed you before and some more. I have shared them here.